I'm Tijuana Ricks, and the PAD taught me how to create something out of nothing.
Hello and welcome to the PAD podcast, and another great episode to share with you today of my interview with Tijuana Ricks. Tijuana is a film and television director, actor, producer, performance coach, voiceover artist. She is a semifinalist for the Shondaland Women in Directing Fellowship, and she is creative producer and founding member of Some Folks Productions, which is all about raising and elevating the stories of the underrepresented in the film and production, film and TV world. So she'll talk about that. She'll talk about her journey at WashU, her role on Student Senate, running the day of Student Senate voting and winning, actually, and receiving some accolades as a member of the Student Senate. Her involvement in a now infamous, after episode 3, Emily Brandwin, infamous performance group, sketch comedy group. So I'm really, really excited to share this episode with you all, and very grateful to Tijuana for spending the time to talk to me. So there you go. Enjoy the show. All right. My guest today is Tijuana Ricks. Tijuana is a proud, I'm going to assume, I keep asking every guest, Tijuana, proud alum of WashU?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I rave about my time at WashU all the time to
Nice.
people. Yeah.
You are a very accomplished writer, producer, director, actor, TV and film. You're based in Los Angeles. And as we just talked about before even recording, you've never been not working
Yeah.
in the field of entertainment. And I'm just so delighted that you've taken the time here to kind of talk to me about how you found WashU and what you learned here in the Performing Arts Department, and, as I say, elevate and celebrate alumni like yourself. So let's start there. Where are you from, and how did you find your way to St. Louis, Missouri?
Yes. I am from a very small town in Louisiana called Gramercy, Louisiana. It is a small town of just a few thousand people between New Orleans and Baton Rouge. So if you looked at the map of Louisiana along that Mississippi River, there's
Yeah.
New Orleans to the south and Baton Rouge a little further up north along the river. You put your finger right in the middle and you'll land on Gramercy. So
Yeah.
we're split the difference. If you've
Sure.
ever had Zapp's potato chips, they were
Oh,
the
yes.
origin is Gramercy, Louisiana. I used to get those in like elementary school for prizes. They give us Zapp's potato chips.
Fantastic.
But yeah, it didn't have much more than, sugarcane fields, a sugar refinery and the potato chip factory and a bunch
Yeah.
of cow fields and that sort of thing. And no drama department or any of that at our high
Really?
school.
Wow.
Yeah, I just loved television and would do
Hmm.
little reenactments and stuff at home. And I was, of course, an overachiever. So, straight A student, Letcher High School, go Bulldogs, and, cheerleader and all of that. I had that dichotomy of being like in the library club, the president of the library club, but also a cheerleader. So,
Nice. You got all the bases covered there.
yeah. And so when I graduate or when I got close to graduation, you take the PSATs, you take the SATs and all of that. I started getting literature in the mail from all these universities, and WashU I found was very good at like pinpointing what you might be interested in based
Oh,
on like the things that you had listed in your, the little surveys and things that you do. So I was getting mail from WashU almost every day. And, when you're like 17, 16, you're like, I'm getting mail. Like, this is exciting. And it's
yeah.
addressed to me and it's appropriate. And I'm excited by it. And you're seeing all
Nice.
these pictures and you're learning about the campus. Like, funny thing, I never actually even visited WashU before my first day. Like,
Wow.
I just went because I was like, I got a gut feeling about this place
Nice.
based on all that's being offered and the classes and the people. And I think I talked to one person on the phone, but like that was it.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I'm in. Let's go. They
Nice.
offered me a scholarship and I was like, now I'm really in. Let's go. Like,
Fantastic.
yeah.
Nice. And you majored, I believe, in psychology and drama. Do I have that right?
Yes. Yes. I
And
had a double major.
was it the interdisciplinary nature of what you could study here that also intrigued you?
Absolutely. Like, of
Oh,
course, like, in my class, I think it was like 90% of us went in pre-med. And I
yeah.
think it still holds at
That's
WashU
a
these
lot.
days.
Yes.
And so, of course, I went in pre-med. I thought, I'm going to be a doctor, but I want to also take an acting class and do this and do that. And that was completely a possibility, which is something that was made very clear in all that literature that I
Of
got.
course. Yeah, you could taste all
So
the ice cream, as they say, right?
yeah, and so
Yeah.
I signed up for the focus classes. So I was in the focus workshops with Henry Shfay
Mhm.
as we were doing, I think it was horror in theater
Yes.
or something like that. Like
I've
that
heard
was
about
the
that class. Yes, yes, yes.
yeah, that was my class. It was like horror and yeah, some sort of like in theater. And I was at the time and still am a huge horror fan. And
Nice.
I was obsessed with Stephen King and all that. And literally in the focus thing, they're like, you're going to be reading Stephen King and Anne Rice and these things. And I was like, yes, college. I can't wait. Let's
You're like, I
go.
do this anyway.
Yeah. It's like, this is awesome.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So I was like, I'm ready for that nerd fest. Let's go. Like,
I love
so
it.
yeah,
We just celebrated his retirement this past week.
I know.
He's
I really wanted
officially,
to try to make it, but I couldn't
yeah.
make it out
Oh,
for,
of course,
yeah.
you're quite busy, but yeah, Henry's been here that long. It's
Hmm.
we're very lucky to have had him as a chair for many years, of course.
Yeah. And I'm
Um,
like, I might be aging myself by saying in that class, one of my favorite memories was Harold Ramis, when he was still alive, came
yes,
and visited the campus. He was friends with Henry and he was a WashU alum.
yeah,
And he was showing a movie. I think they were doing a screening of it at the Tivoli. So he came to the PAD and he sat in on our class, the horror class. And Henry was like, okay, well, he's going to have an opportunity to discuss things with you all and talk. And like, if you want to, read something for him or whatever, he's open to that. One of my classmates and I decided to do a scene from Ghostbusters for Harold Ramis. And
nice.
Henry let us do it. And I was like, this is awesome. I got to do that.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
I'd like to audition for a part in a movie you've already done.
Yeah. Here it is. Here's our
That's
favorite scene.
Well, what
Here
a
we go.
thrill that is. That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Hmm.
So you progressed through WashU. Do you find that your involvement, or what piqued your interest initially in psychology in addition to drama? I think
Yeah.
the drama
Sure.
side is clear, but
Yeah.
what made you, did you double major, I assume?
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
started out, initially I was biology and psychology. And
Ah,
then I realized being in that focus class, you also had to take an acting class and I was obsessed. And so
yeah.
by the end of the second semester, I started to look at how well I was doing in the biology classes. I say well, but that's
Yeah.
an
Right.
exaggeration
Sure.
versus what was the excitement I had for going to classes in the PAD.
Yeah.
And I sat down with Jeffrey Matthews and had a little discussion about like what I wanted to really major in. He was my advisor because of the focus program. And he was like, well, he gave me some advice. He's like, I'm not telling you what to do. I was like, but I was like, okay, I'm definitely going to change my major to performing arts, emphasis in acting, and I'm going to keep the psychology major. This was always something I was absolutely just enthralled by. Part of the pre-med when I started WashU was I really wanted to be a forensic pathologist. So
Oh, interesting. Ah,
always interested in, the dissection of the human condition. So not
that's,
necessarily the dissection of the human body,
I
clearly
was going to
from my
say
biology class grades,
right.
but
Your
the human.
fascination with horror films is coming back up again here.
Yes, yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's all tied in together. So
Sure.
yeah, the psychology stuck and
Yep.
then adding the performing arts. And I feel like they complemented each other wonderfully and
I
still
was
do.
going to ask you that. I would think that someone with a major in psychology can really dig into a character and
Hmm.
perhaps understand that character even better, because you have that expertise. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And
Yeah.
I feel like it's also supported me after WashU. I went to the drama school at Yale in
Mm,
acting.
yeah.
And a part of that is it's so collaborative. You get to help the playwrights develop their plays. So there's several really well-known playwrights right now who I help them develop their plays in the initial
Sure.
uh, stages because we were just classmates at that point.
Oh,
So
wow.
like playwrights like Marcus Gardley
Yeah.
and Roland Jones and Roberto Aguirre Sarcasa, who's also the showrunner on Riverdale and
Yeah.
those and those sorts of things. We would read early versions of their scripts and workshop them
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
So with that background of psychology, it really helped me sort of put to words what some of the sort of inner conflict
Yeah.
possibilities for these characters were to help people like move those pieces along.
Of course.
And the same with like my own work of being able to like read a script and dissect that character and figure out what their real, intrinsic like sort of motivation is of what is their background, how does that affect them? And
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. I find that so fascinating just in terms of, in addition to my teaching design here at WashU, I teach a class on creativity and talking to artists like yourself and getting a little bit into their creative process. I feel what's so fascinating about what you just said about this symbiotic relationship between a playwright and an actor. First,
Hmm.
you might say trying on the jacket of that play and asking questions about it. Like, is this what the character would do, or what's their motivation to do this?
Right.
Is so much in the psychology side of your brain. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And that was, that's what we were being trained to do was to dissect the character and make them human.
Yeah.
And they were being their wonderful creative selves and basically doing the same thing, but from a different perspective of,
Sure.
serving the story. And then we're trying to serve the character. So it's how
Got
do
it.
they fit together?
Sure.
Which, some of the better relationships that you develop with playwrights than when you have the same sort of sensibility of, okay, yeah, it's
Right.
complementary for sure.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So we've talked, I think, a little bit about the curricular side of you while you were here at WashU. What else did you do sort of extracurricularly?
I was in a sketch comedy troupe that no longer exists. It makes me sad. Anyone listening who wants to resurrect it, please hit me up on Instagram. It's called The Cactables. It was a sketch comedy troupe. At the time, the only other comedy troupe on campus was Mama's Pot Roast, and they
Ah,
were improv. So it was the improv troupe and the comedy troupe, the sketch comedy troupe.
yeah.
And honestly, if it weren't for Cactables, I wouldn't be acting. I
Is that
literally,
right? Wow.
yeah. Like even though I was in that class and interested in it, I started at WashU, and another one of my obsessions at the time was like SNL, and
Of
there's
course.
a sketch comedy troupe from the sort of 90s, early 2000s, or yeah, I guess it was 90s. The State, I was that was on
Ah,
MTV.
yeah.
Loved them. People like Michael Ian Black and
Yeah.
yeah, like Thomas Lennon, like these actors that now started off in that, and I really wanted to be that. Like the performer side of me was like that. They are, if you go back and watch some of those sketches now, they are so ahead of their time. Like those sketches are funny now.
Yeah.
Then people thought they were weird and strange. They're
Isn't that
hilarious
always the
right
way? You're
now.
not truly appreciated in your time, right?
Yeah, and I absolutely appreciated every bit of it. And I was like, yeah, I want to do that. And during orientation, I saw the Cactables perform, and they were advertising that their auditions were coming up, and they did something similar. Their style was also kind of like absurd, and I immediately connected to it. And I think I said hello to another alum that's now a good friend, Sanjit De Silva, who is
Yeah.
in Cactables. And I was like, I think I want to do audition for this. He was like, come, please. Especially, talk about the diversity level. Like Sanjay
Sure.
is Sri Lankan. And as an African American woman, he was like, yes, he's like, we need a black woman. He's like, please, we need your perspective. It's like me and a bunch of white people. Please
Yeah.
go. And
Yeah.
I'm like,
Nice.
okay. And so I auditioned after almost forgetting about it and coming in late and like running. 'Cause, you're a freshman and
Right.
but I got in, and that was the first thing I'd ever auditioned for, the first thing that ever like I really performed with a group of people,
Yeah.
and they're all still very good friends. So
Wow.
it's another part of that. Like you're growing up and learning creatively how to talk about these things and how to like perform. And I accredit Cactables to teaching me how to direct, how to write, how to produce, how to all of it,
Of
because
course.
you're self-sufficient troupe. Like you do the thing, even
Right.
how to, budget and all of
Sure.
that,
How to
which,
advocate for the art,
yeah,
right? Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And so I did Cactables. I also did all student theater.
Ah,
Yeah, I was in a couple of those shows.
nice.
I, my, I was also a senator for a couple of years. I was senator of the year while I was
Is
there
that
once.
right? Wow.
Yeah. One
Hmm.
of the reasons, I mean, I became a senator. I ran for Senate literally on election day, because I realized, I mean, we were talking about it, my group of friends were mostly in the arts. There were a lot of people that were in a cappella groups and theater troops and various like musical groups that were developing on campus. There was a breakdancing troupe at that point. Like
Yeah.
there were all these groups, and we were getting our budgets back, and every year it was like they'd say no to things on the budgets, and we're like, what? But we need lights, like you can't. And like all student theater would get obliterated. They're like, we need sound, like that's, we can't cut that budget. And I decided to ask questions, and I asked someone I knew who was a senator, like, how do they make that decision? They're like, well, the budget committee, it's all people that are people on the Senate, and we review it and we just decide. And we're like, okay, I'm gonna ask around. And they're like, I didn't know anyone who was in the creative arts who was a senator. And I'm like, that's our problem. We don't have an advocate. We don't have someone
Right.
on the Senate who knows that you need sound, that you need lights, and that you
Right.
need, these things that, like, it's not unheard of for an a cappella group to need Ricola. Like you need, you need like,
Exactly.
the yeah, the budget is, it's necessary.
Yeah.
So I sent an email out to all my friends and everyone I knew, and like generally to the groups of, like, the Greenleafs and to these folks. And
Sure.
I was like, hey, elections today, write me in. Like literally, I'm not exaggerating, I'm
I
not
love
joking.
it.
I was like, yeah, election is today, write me in, and I will stand up for you. I
Nice.
will make sure that I get on that budget committee and I can tell them that this stuff that you're asking for is necessary. The
Right.
money's there. It's our money too. We might as well have someone who can advocate for you for it. So I did. I
Nice.
did that, and I did a bunch of other like little initiatives that were basically serving the arts teams and things. I overhauled the office system. Everybody, student group offices were only a handful of them at that point, and there were
Wow.
so many groups that had offices for decades that just used them as storage rooms and didn't really use them as meeting rooms. And there were places, people who needed meeting rooms.
Right.
So
Oh, that's
yeah,
awesome.
I
That's awesome.
those
I
sorts of things.
I in
It
no way
was,
want to elevate procrastination, but I can't help but notice that you got into the sketch comedy group
yeah,
last
yeah,
second. You got into student senate last
yeah,
second.
yeah. That
But
was that was a trend, and now I think I prepare a lot
I
more.
love
Like
it.
now, I prepare. I take some time now. Now
Yeah.
I I've
Uh,
learned. Now,
that's amazing.
youthful, sort of optimism, where you're just
Oh,
like
sure.
dive on in right now. Yeah,
Sure,
let's do it.
sure. Wow, what an amazing story. And it's such an impressive story while you were here at WashU, but I have to point out your career since WashU has been insanely impressive. I've watched your reel on your website and all the work you've been doing in TV and film. You're a member of the Alliance of Women Directors and
Mhm,
Women in Film.
mhm,
I would love for you to kind of take us on that journey post graduation. Like, how did you what did after WashU,
mhm.
you've got the cap and gown and you've got the
Yeah,
diploma. That
that's
what
you
happened
were
next for Tijuana?
well. That's also a sort of funny story. On graduation day, I got my first professional acting job.
Is
I
that
was
right?
called on graduation day. I toured with the Metro Theater Company based
Yeah.
in St.
Mhm.
Louis. I had auditioned a few weeks before graduation and hadn't heard anything. I went to a callback and like hadn't heard anything. And on graduation day, the morning after we did the ceremony and we went back to my apartment, we were about to go out to dinner. The phone rings and it was them. And they were like, we'd like to invite you to be a part of the company. I was
Wow.
like, I just got my first professional acting job. I guess I'm an actor. I don't have to go to law school. I can be an actor. So I toured with the Metro Theater Company for a
Uh,
year,
that's
and
amazing. Toured all
yeah,
over the country?
all over the country. Yeah.
Wow.
But it's a sort of like, I wouldn't even say bus and truck because it's not, it's literally a van with like,
Bus
with
and truck
like,
would be generous, I guess.
yeah, it was literally like one of those 18 passenger vans, and
Sure,
the
sure.
set crushed into the back. Very like perfect Tetris that we had to
Yes,
learn to get that set in there.
for sure.
And I think there were five of us for the most part. I think six sometimes, like, in the van, traveling, driving.
Yeah.
everywhere.
Wow.
We literally drove to Florida, like down to like, I think we went all the way down to like Fort Lauderdale. Like we
Sure. Yeah.
drove from St. Louis.
So for a
Yeah,
22-year-old, was that really exciting to
it
take?
was.
Yeah.
And I was the baby in the group too. So
Hmm.
it was again another place to learn from the people who were already doing it before me.
And
And
I'm assuming a lot of problem solving, like,
hmm
maybe you had rain shows. I don't know, like,
hmm Well,
things
yeah.
can
And
go
I mean,
wrong, as we know.
yeah, and especially in live theater when you're doing the same show over and over again in different settings. So we'd
Yeah.
have to set up the set and if they weren't exactly honest about the specifications of the space that we were going to be using. And a
Sure.
lot of times we were performing in schools. Other things happen. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow. Wow.
it was a lot of fun. And it was also very informative about like the different cultures in our country, like
Hmm.
going from place to place again as being like the only Black woman in that troupe,
Yeah.
going into some of these towns where literally some of the kids had never met a Black person
Oh
before.
my God. Wow.
And it was, now I'm there in their, cafetorium, like doing this play and sitting in their classroom teaching them how to do little improv
Sh-
games. And
Sure, sure.
it was interesting. I had one little kid. I can't remember exactly where I was. It was somewhere in the Midwest, but and it felt like not very far from St. Louis. And this kindergartner asked me, he said, "Is everyone Black where you come from? Because everyone's white here." He said,
Wow.
and his teacher was like, "Whoa, I'm so sorry." And I'm
From the
like,
mouths of
"No,
babes. Yeah.
yeah, exactly." And I was like, "No, no, he's curious. I'm gonna answer this question for him and let him know.
Sure.
No, there's diversity in other places."
Yeah.
But yeah, so after that, I had auditioned for Yale while I was doing that. So
Hmm.
I snuck away in the middle of the tour and flew to San Francisco and auditioned
And
for
nice.
Yale and flew back. And they didn't know. It was like on a long
Wow.
weekend and auditioned for Yale. And I got in, and it was
No
just
easy, I have to point out, no
no.
easy task getting into the
Mm,
Yale School of Drama, by the way, for those that don't
mm.
know.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
was a bit jaw dropped, and I was like, okay. I always look for these little milestones in my life of like those confirmation that I'm doing the right thing.
sure.
And, getting that call on graduation day was definitely
There you go.
one of them. And
You
then,
were an unemployed graduate for all of what, 20 minutes?
yeah, literally,
Yeah.
I remember being marching like onto, the quad and being like, go back to the theater, support the arts. And there we go.
I love it.
Um, and
So you got into
then,
Yale. That's again
yeah, got
super
into
impressive.
Yale, did that, had a great time, met some of my best friends, and have still collaborate with them. Most of the people in Some Folks Productions, a production company that I'm a founder of,
Yeah.
are people that I met and have known since Yale. And then I moved to New York. I thought I was going to be playing every one of Shakespeare's ladies for the rest of my life. That I was going to be just a Shakespearean actor
Right. Right.
doing theater and doing Broadway and all
Yeah.
of that. And I moved to New York and I did a bunch of readings and stuff for like my friends, and met a lot of people. But the first paying job I booked was a Law and Order. So
Is
I
that
was
right?
like, yeah,
Yes.
I was like, woo, I'm in. I am officially a New
Yeah.
York actor. So I booked an episode of Law and Order. It was Law and Order SVU, and that turned into a recurring role on SVU that Dr. Marnie Aiken, you'll see me in some reruns still from like a million years ago. Um, Still get residual checks. They're like a penny, but they're still runs.
It's you can't
Yeah.
buy a stick
So
of gum with the residual check, but
no, it costs more to mail it than they
probably.
did. Yeah. So I did the Law and Orders, and it just sort of started a television career. I also booked a couple of commercials right out of school too that so grateful for because the commercial money is always a lovely surprise. So yeah, I did some television national commercials and Law and Order. And then from there, my agents were like, TV land is really loving you. If you can
Mm,
stick around in New York, we can do that. And I was like, great. So Law and Order SVU. I had a recurring for a long time on regular Law and Order,
yeah.
before it. was canceled the first time. I did a bunch of other shows that were early in my career. I did a musical that was written by another friend of mine from Yale. We did it at the
Uh,
Alliance and then at the Arena Stage, the Women of Brewster Place. It was the original cast for the Women of Brewster Place musical.
oh, interesting.
Um, yes, because I also sing. So,
Yeah.
got to do everything.
The Alliance, for those that don't know, is a fantastic company in Atlanta.
Yeah, in
But
the
sorry,
Arena
go ahead.
Stage in
Yeah.
DC.
Nice.
Um, yeah, so I did that show and I did one Broadway show in New York, A Time to Kill,
Mm,
which was very short-lived, but met some great people. I got to check that off on my bucket list.
yeah.
And it was one of those things that I realized I'm like, yeah, my whole career had been like wanting to do Broadway. Well, I did it. Um, and like, I don't need to do that again unless it's something I really, really love, you know?
Sure. Sure.
It's I realized pretty early on that like theater, that is a certain lifestyle that I'm not necessarily in love with.
That's fair.
That
Yeah.
yeah, and like television and film, I love that. Like I
Hmm.
will gladly get up at 3 a.m. to be on set by 4 a.m. for a TV show
Sure.
versus starting my day at 7 p.m. I'm
Yeah.
just an
Yeah.
earlier kind of
Yeah.
like that's my
That's
temperament. That's my personality. I will
nice.
come in sunshiny and happy at 5 a.m.,
Yeah. Yeah. I
7
tell
o'clock.
students all the time it's as important to know what you don't want to do as it is to
Hmm.
what you do want to do. And I think that's
Yeah.
wise that you're like, yeah, I tried on that jacket and that didn't fit. I don't really like Broadway. Like,
Yeah. I'm like, and I've told, my friends and people who they're like, well, what if I get this play off on Broadway? Would you do? I'm like, yeah, of course I would. Like I
uh,
would like it's
sure.
not it's if it's something that I love and if, absolutely. But
Right.
just to do it, no, I'm good.
Right.
I'm
Right.
good. Been
Huh.
there, done that. But yeah, in 2020 I moved to LA
I was going to ask you
after
when you made that leap to the West
yeah,
Coast. Hmm.
it was I had
So
started directing
pre-pandemic? Oh, sorry.
pre-pandemic.
Oh, gotcha.
I had
Sorry, go ahead. You
started
said started directing.
Yeah, I had started directing in I think it was 2016. I
Okay.
was in a moment. I was doing Luke Cage at the time, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones,
Hmm.
and Iron Fist, those Marvel Netflix shows. I was on
Yeah.
those. And I went on set for I think it was like the second season of Luke Cage. And the director, you meet the director when you go on, and it was a role that I'd been recurring on. So like I knew most of the crew, but the directors were always different, of course. So I met the director for this episode and it was Millicent Sheldon. And I realized as I shook her hand, I was like, oh my goodness, I think you're the first Black woman director I have ever worked with on television.
Wow.
And I was sitting in the makeup chair and I was talking to one of the makeup artists and I was like, wow, I was like, I think I just had this realization that like I have done a lot of TV at that point. And I had to go back to my own IMDb page and like
Right.
count how many. And it was like 90 episodes of television. And she was the first Black
Wow.
woman that I had ever worked with.
Wow.
Like that is absurd. And at the time, I had been helping friends produce short films and consulting on those sorts of things. And was doing it then for a friend, and we were just talking about directors of like who should direct this.
Hmm.
And we had been developing it together for like over a year. And I was like, oh, and I had this list of people I was going to approach to direct it. And I realized I was a part of the problem, that everyone on that list was a white guy. I'm like,
Yes. Yes.
this I'm a part of I just prioritized them
Yeah.
before even looking beyond. And I had a conversation with my friend who was the writer, and I'm like, so who's actually, by the way, a WashU alum, Ken Verini, who
Huh,
was like we were in Cactables together a million years ago, and he
got
wrote
it.
this short film. And I was like, what do you think about me directing it? And he's like, yeah, of course. Like you should direct it. I'm
Nice.
like, okay, great. So I dove right in and did that. And it did really well. It got into a lot of festivals, including the St. Louis Film Festival at the
Fantastic.
time,
Nice.
which is an Oscar qualifying festival, by the way,
Mm,
folks.
sure.
Submit. And it got into Series Fest at the time because it was kind of like a proof of concept pilot. And from there, we got a shopping deal and I got a bunch of attention as a director. It got written up in a bunch of different magazines and things. And it was my first thing I'd ever directed. And I started submitting to fellowships, and I was a finalist for the Shondaland directing fellowship.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, this is something I can do.
Right.
And other friends started asking me to direct things, and I loved it. I remember
Nice.
one of my friends coming to visit me on set, and it was like an overnight. It was like 3 in the morning, and he
Hmm.
was helping out with some of the fight choreography on this particular short film. And I was like, I'm so tired. I was like, tell me why I'm doing this again. He's like, please. He's like, you're gonna go to sleep after wrap, and you're gonna come right back.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
gonna be like, when am I doing this again? I'm like, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. So yeah, I fell in love with it. Fell in love with
Nice.
directing, started getting momentum, and I realized in order to gain more of that, I needed to move to LA, that it
Hmm.
wasn't going to happen in New York. Convinced my husband to sell our condo, pack stuff up, go to LA. We moved in January of 2020.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
That was
then
just before some catastrophic
something happened.
something
Something
happened in
happened.
March, as I
Yeah.
recall.
Just a couple months later,
Yep.
something happened. World
Wow.
shut down. Everything
Yeah.
turned upside down. So like
Yeah.
there were all of these things I had lined up that just sort of disappeared and went away.
Hmm.
So it sort of forced us to slow down a little bit, which was
Hmm.
fine.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, it's taken a little bit to pick that momentum back up, but I think we're raring now, like
Sure.
moving along. I did the Ryan Murphy directing fellowship last in 2022, and I'm a women in film directing fellowship right now,
Right.
fellow. So that's
Wow.
pretty great. It's
Wow.
all, it's all happening now.
What would, and this may be a dumb question, but what aspect or what percentage of your life is now directing versus acting? Because you've
Uh,
done some amazing
mhm,
acting work. You've been on Billions, on Showtime, and you've worked with,
mhm.
some of the greats of the
Yeah.
industry.
Yeah.
What is there a maybe a not so even split now with directing and
Yeah,
acting?
it's as far as like the focus goes, like I have some really great agents who are
Hmm.
consistently getting me auditions for television and film work. And so that
Sure.
is, I say, my motto is like acting is my day job, and I'm always going to do it. I'm probably going to
Sure.
do it when I'm like 90. But yeah, I'm as a my personal focus of the work that I am personally pursuing is mostly directing. And I have a manager who's working on that as well with me. We have
Fantastic.
meetings and those sorts of things, especially as like a writer director. It takes a little while because
Yeah.
my focus really is like I want to direct my own stuff.
Of
So
course. Of course.
then that's a whole process and that's a
Yeah.
whole thing.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Hmm.
it's acting is my day job
I
indeed
see. I
still.
see.
And I do mostly like these days, my day to day, it's mostly voiceover work.
Okay.
Can you tell?
Of course. You're the first guest with an actual microphone, and for that, I'm eternally grateful.
Yeah, of course.
I have to make an observation, and please tell me if this is not a good one. It seems to me at different inflection points of your career arc, and even while you were still here at WashU, that there have been moments where you were just like, I'm gonna go for it. Like that there's some sort of push over the cliff that you always have a parachute. You always seem to like make it work. Like, how do you do that? And is that an even
Yeah.
a fair analysis?
No, I think there is definitely an element of that. I feel like I make sure that I'm prepared for that leap before I
Ah,
do it.
fair. Yeah.
I'm was a good student at WashU, even though, the little biology mishap, but then
We
everything
won't talk about
else, we
biology.
won't talk about that. But then beyond that, was a good student there. So I do a lot of research before I
Mhm.
actually leap
Yeah,
and make sure that this is the right thing for me, or try to learn as much as I can as possible
sure,
before
sure.
doing it. But I
I
I
didn't mean to
also
make it
I
sound
think
impulsive. Yeah,
no, I mean,
yeah, yeah.
because creativity sometimes, the inspiration strikes and you got to go and you
Right.
got to do it.
Sure.
And yeah, no, I don't see it as impulsive. I feel like it also feels like it builds to that thing, that it's
Yes.
all accumulated knowledge up to that point where you're like, oh, I actually, the moment when I realized I should direct the Vampire Leland, I thought, oh, I actually have enough knowledge to be able to do this. I
Yeah.
do know what's necessary to make this happen. I
Yeah.
basically do it behind the scenes, and with my acting training and the many, many hours on set that I have had and working as a producer alongside so many directors at that point, I was like, I know what I could do this.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just need to buy a book on how to properly notate things.
Right. Right.
And like,
Right. I find that that's an amazing creative confidence that artists like yourself have. And not to say that, it doesn't exist in other fields or anything else, but it's at a certain point, I think you have to say, well, what's the worst that could happen?
mhm.
And if the worst that could happen is, for example, I had a student ask me, well, I'm really interested in starting the student group. And it was related without getting into names. It was related to our sort of astronomy professors. And I said, you should write to this astronomy professor who's a kind of a big deal, in the industry. And he said, I'm a bit intimidated by doing that. And that's when I wrote back, I'm like, what's the worst that could happen? They just don't
Yeah.
reply. Like, that's kind of where I get with students. I'm like, what's the worst that could happen?
Yeah.
They just, you'll just not hear from them. And,
And
you know,
and I feel like at this point, especially now in my career, I hear that a lot too,
yeah,
still, because, especially when you're in pursuit as a director of
sure.
work in television, like my ideal is to be able to start directing episodic television, like the stuff I've spent hours and days
Of
and,
course.
at this point, accumulated months of my life on
Yeah.
sets doing as an actor, directing other actors in that position is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And the general rule of how you get that is relationships. And
Mm,
you're not going to have those relationships and build those relationships and build that trust or break down that door unless you take the jump and take the risk and or
yeah.
inquire or push your way in somehow
Yeah. Yeah.
kindly, nicely with a cup
Right.
of coffee in hand. But like you gotta break down those doors for yourself sometimes. Yeah.
Mm,
And if
such great wisdom. I sincerely appreciate that. Wow. Would you like to talk about the work you do with some folks? You mentioned that
yeah.
you're a co-founder.
Yes, I'm a co-founder of a production company called Some Folks Productions. We produce film, television, podcasts, and short films. So we also produce a film festival,
Mhm.
which right now it's called the Southeast East Asian Film Festival, the Sea Asian Film Festival.
Mhm.
Does short films, and we are trying to promote, awareness of up and coming Southeast and East Asian filmmakers. Our whole goal with some folks is to shine the light on the stories that have been untold up till now. So it's, underrepresented communities are at the forefront, both in front of and behind the camera in
Right.
everything that we do.
Mm,
So, and even underrepresented communities, I mean, the podcast that we produced is called Good Pain, and it's about the BDSM community.
mm.
So it's literally like a
Sure.
community that no one talks about, but there are so many people involved.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun and a big learning experience of how to get things done in Hollywood. Because we
Mm,
have a slate of probably 40 to 50 like possible projects, like
right.
ideas that have been fleshed out, some that are fully realized into scripts, some that are just pitches or treatments at this point,
Right.
but a laundry list spanning all genres and everything, including reality television. We have a reality show that is being pitched around right now.
Hmm.
But it's been a real learning experience of how to get in the door for those things. So
I
we're
bet.
still in our infancy, but I think we'll be quite a creative force once we get
Nice.
our footing. Once
For
we,
sure.
as I
And
said,
and
break down those doors. Yeah.
and it's a rather young company, I assume, began
Hmm.
after you landed in LA.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we started in 2021, in the summer
Mm,
of 2021, and really got rolling in 2020, like late 2022.
hmm.
So we were, setting up and deciding what it is we wanted to do, developing some projects together. And then we got the opportunity to produce this film festival. We do it in partnership with the Segerstrom Center in Orange County, California. So this May, on May 3rd, we're doing a screening of our winner of the Sea Asian Film Festival, the short films there,
Nice.
alongside we also license a film, a mainstream film that is by an Asian American or Asian uh, filmmaker. So
Mhm.
we're doing Past Lives this year, and we are screening it at the Segerstrom Center out in their outdoor theater, free to the public. So if
Nice.
you're in California and Orange
Yeah.
County on May 3rd, come and check it out. And there'll be music and there'll be food and we'll be
Nice.
there. You can meet me in person, come hang out.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
And you can
fantastic.
see an up and coming filmmaker's film right before Past Lives. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
mhm.
That's fantastic. It really is. I was just
Yeah.
telling some students, was it yesterday? Yes. Today's Friday. Yeah, I was telling some students about how they've been submitting final projects, and certainly since I was a student, which was ancient history now, the democratization of the tools of video editing
Mm.
specifically, they're pros at this. It's
Hmm.
amazing what they put together, and they sort of underscore it with some music and what they screen essentially in my class at this sort of we're in the final project stage, like I said, is just amazing to me. And
Yeah.
it's like there's no chance I could have done this when I was their age.
Well, this year we're really seeing like last year was our first year, so we had quite a few entries that first year, but this year I think we've 4 times the amount of
Yeah.
submissions, and
Mhm.
the quality is just mind-blowing. We've seen
Yes.
some really beautiful films and really
Yeah.
excited to show the world who we found.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of amazing.
And
I've
what fertile ground for these stories to be told when the talent is there to make these really high quality films.
Yeah. And it's
And
kind of cool. Like Segerstrom just wanted to do something to celebrate, AAPI month.
mhm,
And they're like, we have the capability to do film screenings and we do so few of them. So when
mm.
we approached them with that idea of screening our festival and also screening some of the mainstream films that people don't, I'm gonna say they don't actually see it in the mainstream theater. Like they
Right.
wouldn't do it. I'm like, Past Lives was nominated for an Oscar,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's still box office wise
Right.
didn't it's not hitting Marvel numbers. So it gives the opportunity to see some really beautiful
Ah,
films.
I love it.
Yeah. Hmm.
Well, I'm just noting the time. I've already squandered too much of your time
That's okay.
with this podcast. But is there anything else you want to make sure we chat about, or
um
that you want to promote? The work you're doing is just extraordinary. Um,
yeah.
I'm
I'm trying to
sorry that we
think
never
of like
crossed paths when you were a student here and I was a teacher.
yeah. I'm trying to think. I can't really think. I think we covered
Yeah,
basically
a lot. Yeah.
everything. I mean, I have
It's
this film that we produced with some folks. It's called Homecoming. It's a short horror film going back to my
nice.
roots
Nice. Nice.
that is hitting the festival scene soon. So if you want to
Nice.
follow me on Instagram, Tijuana Ricks, or go to my website, check out announcements, or follow
Yeah.
Some Folks Productions.
Yep.
And you can sign up for a newsletter or our mailing list on somefolksproductions.com. And we'll
Nice.
keep you up to date as to where
We'll,
those things will be screening.
we'll make sure we hyperlink all these things on the description of the podcast. And just it's been delightful. It's kind of nice that you're going back to your horror roots. We've just gone back full circle to,
Yeah.
from your first class at WashU with Henry Shvay to where you are now. And there are some threads there that I think are just really wonderful to hear directly from you about. So
Yeah,
thank you for your
of course.
time, for sort of paying it forward and inspiring the next generation of PAD students here at WashU.
Yeah. Happy to be
Uh,
here.
there you have it. My thanks, deepest thanks to Tijuana Ricks for joining the PAD podcast. So very grateful to her. So very grateful to all the alums that have said yes to to me to talk with me on a podcast like this one. If you yourself are a PAD alum and would love to do a podcast, a similar interview, please reach out to me. I would love to do it. In the meantime, have a great rest of your day, rest of your evening, rest of your week, potentially weekend, and looking forward to sharing the next episode with you. Thank you.